Okay, hi, hello. I always find it funny when we start doing these things and getting used to it, switching on. So, welcome to a support session for authentic success awareness. And I'm going to be shuttling backwards and forwards between Zoom and YouTube Live. So, if you've got questions, feel free to put them on the YouTube Live and I'll answer them as best I can. So this is really the first real support session in this program. And the first one was a little welcome. And this one is all about supporting you if you are doing the video workshop, which is Authentic Success Awareness. Now you can find this on YouTube. I can't say it right, hey. And you can also find it on Roshanara by Pearl Escape. So you should be able to find the link to that on pretty much every video in the details, or just message me directly and I'll let you know. So that's a free to access, pay what you can, when you can platform. And all 7 of the video workshops in Authentic Success Your Way are available there. And just so you know, these are videos that I created at the end of last year, the beginning of this year. And the whole point of those was to refresh and reimagine the practical trainings that I did during the pandemic. So you might have done those. They were on Udemy and they were very popular, but they were really fitting into that Udemy standard. And what I wanted to do was something much simpler that was just a video workshop and something that you could experience and feel as if you were on a retreat in a beautiful part of the world, because I really wanted you to have that experience, because I know that sometimes it's just not possible to go on retreat. Maybe it's time, maybe it's money, maybe you have health issues like me, and just getting away and having that time away isn't possible for you, or isn't possible because you just don't feel ready for it yet. So I wanted to make it accessible for those reasons. But what I wanted to talk about, so today, the Authentic Success Awareness video is available. So I don't want to kind of rehash it and go over it again, okay? So it's all there, and please, please do go and make the most of that video. And it's got an exercise in there, which is very much like a vision board. You know, when you're looking at things and deciding, is that something I want to put on my vision board? Is that something that's right for me or not? Now, this is a practice, and I would say, like, if you can take that practice, you know, that you do when you're doing a vision board and really incorporate that into your everyday life, it's fantastic, because then you're kind of asking that question every day, almost every moment, to say, is this right for me? Is this what's right for me? Because as I often say, authentic success is always changing. So even if we put something on our vision board, perhaps we, you know, the next day it could be something we've kind of changed our minds, or it's not right for us anymore. So I'm just going to check on YouTube just to see if we've got any people joining us now. Not yet, but feel welcome to join us. So what I was going to say about the vision boarding is I have a kind of a weird mystical story to tell you about that, because the last time I did a vision board, I was actually doing at a day that we did, and I was doing a talk, an inspirational talk. Oh, hi, Helen. Hi, Helen. How are you? Let's see. We've got a hi. Just going to carry on talking. I think what I'll wait for Helen to unmute. And I was just going to say, when I did my original vision board, I was picking up various pieces. And hi, Helen. How are you?
I'm a little bit under the weather. I'm a bit
Oh,
croaky, so
bless you. Bless you. Just wanted to remind you, you're also live on YouTube.
I know.
Good. I'm glad. I'm so glad you joined me. So, sorry, how are you? You've got a cold, have you?
I think so. Yeah, I thought it was hay fever, but I think actually I've got the lurgy.
Oh, bless you. It's a horrible thing to have at this time of year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not been fun. Because you do think it's hay fever, and then it turns out to be something else. So
Yeah,
hey
well,
ho.
I think it's like everything, is it? Rest fluids and paracetamol seems to be the answer for that.
Yeah.
I have a secret trick one I have for colds if you want it. Do you like
Yeah, go on.
do you like spinach?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I do a thing, and it's like I use frozen spinach because I actually had this a lot during COVID, and I was doing this and making this for my family during COVID, and it's literally you just fry up a ton of garlic
Okay.
and like onions or shallots, whatever you use,
Mm,
and then just chuck your spinach in. And if you use it fresh, you can put like a whole bag of spinach in, fresh spinach, and it will just melt down. Or you can use frozen. You can even use like cabbage as well and chop it up. But
mm.
that's my go-to. And what I do is I fry that all up and it shrinks to nothing. But then if you eat that, it's like the mass of spinach and the garlic, and it really will. I've always found it really kicks any bugs like into touch. And I made it for it's funny, I made it for my sister and her husband and the kids when they had COVID really badly, and I like left it on the doorstep. And yeah, just went like that. They ate it because it shrinks down to nothing, so you get like a huge amount of like vitamin C and the spinach and all the good things in that in like just one mouthful. So I always find that gives it a really good kick. But I think anything with garlic in,
Definitely, yeah. I mean, garlic and onion both have properties that are very anti-inflammatory and antibacterial and stuff. So yeah, we've started buying garlic in olive oil, so it's ready peeled and it sits in herbs and just sits in
oh,
the oil. Get it in Tesco's, but it means
right.
you don't have to faff around with peeling it, and it doesn't go off, and it doesn't sort of start sprouting or whatever. But it's just there, and
I do like my fresh, well, the sort of dried garlic, but I love the bags of frozen garlic and ginger.
yeah,
And I'm like, that's so great because then it's so easy to add garlic to everything, like when you're cooking. And like the
my
time,
my other my other
sorry,
half refuses to have those
oh,
because
really?
he's got knife skills. And he's
Oh,
like, but by the time I've gone to the freezer and I've taken it out and I've thrown it in, I might just as well have chopped it. And you're like, okay.
I like to have both because it's just like, yeah, when you can be bothered, do they use the garlic? But I tell you what I love is frozen shallots because I'm not big on
Oh,
I'm not big on onions, so I buy bags of frozen shallots, and it's great because that's the thing. Then you start with dinner, just throw everything in, and I'm always on and frozen leeks as well
yeah,
because they're such a
yeah.
pain. They're such a pain, and it's like it's great because then you just put a handful of those in anyway. So
One of my favorite things is to freeze little lozenges. I don't know what you'd call them, of things like lemon juice and lime juice. Because
mm,
how often do you get that recipe and it's like, oh, lemon juice or lime juice, and you use half of the lemon
yeah,
and then
yeah.
the rest of it, just ends up going into the bin. But years ago, I bought these like silicone things from Lakeland, and they're about the size of a 2p coin, but they're supposed to make something like, I don't know, jelly sweets or something like that. But I just freeze like those with lemon or lime.
Such a good idea, but I find I never have lemon goes to waste because if I've got a lemon in the fridge, I use it as an excuse to make pancakes.
Okay, no, good one,
And I'm
good
like,
one.
so it's a really good excuse because I've got a lemon, I have to make pancakes, so I can have lemon and sugar on.
I
Oh,
like the thinking. I
oh.
like the thinking.
So
My
was
other half is gluten intolerant, so it's not quite so easy to
mm,
make stuff like that. I mean, buckwheat's pretty good. We can get some pretty good pancakes out of it, but then it's all of the faff doing it, and so.
you can get the gluten-free flour, can't you? Does
Oh
that make
yeah, yeah, you can, but the substitutes for gluten to actually make things really bind can either make things a little bit rubbery or it's not quite as good. It
uh,
just doesn't have that stick together factor.
I used to make gluten-free cupcakes for a friend of mine I used to work with, and it did take a few goes to get it like to get
Yeah,
the amount of
it
liquid right
does.
and everything. I think you need to put, like I think you needed to put a lot more liquid in it or something to stop it going really dry and horrible. But
Yeah,
I was quite
the
proud of
the
you finally got there.
the tip is about a teaspoon of glycerine.
Oh, there you go. I've kind of given up baking for like masses of cupcakes because I end up eating them all as well, which is,
Yeah,
actually
there is that, isn't there?
I've done this wonderful thing, and it's date crumb, peanut butter, and cacao. So it's like a vegan, healthy alternative to Snickers.
Sounds wonderful. Can I have
It
the
is
recipe, please?
that. It's just that. It's just mix it all.
Mm.
You just mix it all up.
Okay.
It just be. But I got some date stuff given to me, and I was like, yeah, I don't know what to do with it. And then I thought, well, I'll make energy bars, and actually, it was really
Mm.
good. But I made it. I think I made it yesterday, and I was like, do you know what? This is such hard work. I think I want to just go and buy them.
Just go and buy a Snickers bar.
Yeah. Look, I was going to ask you, have you did you get a chance to watch the video?
I watched the first few minutes of it, and it was one of those things, and something happened. Now I'll go back to it, and then I'm afraid I didn't
That's
because I'm
okay. That's okay. Like I
40.
said, you don't have to watch the video. That's absolutely fine.
Mm.
But I thought, you know what, this session is all, I don't want to kind of rehash everything about it, but I
Sure.
do think I was thinking, watching it today, and I was thinking about it, and I thought there was a couple of things that popped up today about awareness, that I thought would be quite sort of nice, sort of an add-on, a little sort of add-on. And I think one of the things I saw, it was quite funny. I was looking, and on social media, this came up, this quote, and I think somebody made it up, but it was supposedly from Freud, and it was like before you self-diagnose with depression or low self-esteem, make sure you've not surrounded yourself with beep 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 people.
Hmm.
I thought that was, and it kind of timed with something else I was thinking, because talking about awareness and about, you know, how we're feeling and feeling safe to sort of say what are your real feelings about things.
Yeah.
And one of the things I see so much on social media is people talking about having depression or anxiety. And I think there's been a big tendency to kind of call this like, you know, this is, we've got depression, we've got anxiety. But I think when we deal with awareness, it's often about looking a bit deeper into that and saying, well, what is this actually? Because very often if we're going through certain situations and we're keeping ourselves in certain situations, it's quite natural that we would feel, you know, depression because we are staying in those situations. So sometimes we have to look deeper into that as to what is actually going on. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I think, and I mean, I'm not sure how aware you are of a lot of the things that sort of people with ADHD go through. Um, and I think statistically, it's shown that a child with ADHD will have experienced 22,000 more negative comments than a neurotypical child before the age of 10.
Mm,
So, as an ADHD adult, I wasn't diagnosed until 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
yeah,
The responses that you have had all of your life are so negative.
yeah,
And then you reach your point of saying, okay, I have ADHD. I now understand what was going on and why, but you're still left with the repercussions of all of those negative responses from, in my case, 50 years.
mm, mm, mm.
Um, so I agree with the comment about the beep, 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 beep people.
Yes, yeah.
The trouble is, an awful lot of the world fits into that category.
100%. And I love that you've talked about that, because that is something we touched on in the video, which is, um, you know, when we're talking about awareness and being being able to have your own authentic feelings, a lot of the time we have repressed, or as you would often say in neurodivergence, we've masked,
Yeah,
and we've been brought up to mask and to not be honest and not to be, and basically the whole thing about authentic success is about being ourselves. But if
mm,
it's not safe to be ourselves,
yeah,
then we are going to turn ourselves in knots trying to be who we are not. So
yeah,
we're playing a part, we're going through life like that. And as you say, neurodivergence is a big area, and it's something, Alice, who's going to be doing the training on Saturday as well. When I first met her, we were talking a lot about migraine and PTSD because these are types of neurodivergence. But actually, it was only when I met her and I started talking to her that I realized that it looks like I'm autistic. And I started doing all the questionnaires online, and suddenly it was like, oh. like, oh, and one of those big questions is this me, or is this who I'm pretending to be? Because it makes it easier for the people around me. And it makes it easier for me because people don't accept me when I behave in a way that's actually quite natural to me. And I do love how there's so much more conversation now about um, expectations. And it's like, well, hang on, it's not that necessarily I am the problem, it's that I'm in a society where there are these expectations of who I'm, how I'm going to feel and how I'm going to react and all of those things. It's like, well, actually, it's not my problem. It's a problem of it's easier for people if I behave in a certain way. It's um, other people are uncomfortable if I say what I really want to say, if I ask the question. And I love it because, more and more, it's like, once you start to look into these things and you start to see other people's responses, there's that recognition, isn't there? It's wonderful recognition when you're talking to other people, you're hearing things, you think, oh my God, that's me, and it's like, and I never even and the other thing is as an older adult that finally gets it, there's a stereotype, and there's a stereotype of what people with certain types of neurodivergence have, and it might be
Mhm.
completely different from us,
Mhm.
but it's kind of like, and also in terms of gender as well,
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff that gets modeled is this is how men with neurodivergence will
Mhm.
experience it. And I think I saw something the other day, and it was like the first time that they've actually studied women's brains of people who have autism. And you think, wow, wow, okay, that explains a lot.
Isn't it crazy that half of the species has been dismissed? And part of the reason for that is, oh well, we can't look at we can't look at women
Yeah.
because you have a menstrual cycle, and that means that what we're going to see isn't going, it's going to be variable, it's not going to be accurate. But that menstrual cycle happens to women between the ages of roughly, we'll say 11 to 50. That's a significant part of women's lives. But no, 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 we can't have that because, it makes things look
I think
variable. And you think,
I do call BS on that because there is no excuse for the lack of research into perimenopause and menopause.
yeah,
Because that's something that affects, you say roughly half the population.
mm,
And yet there's almost, every time you go and see a doctor and you talk about it, it's like, oh, what's this? I don't know. What's that? I don't know. What's
mm,
I mean, there is actually a wonderful video about somebody, like it's a setup kind of thing, but really talking to the doctor and saying, well, what's this? Don't know. What's this? Don't know. And you're like, how can we not know any of this? But
mm,
again, migraine is a form of neurodivergence, and I love. There's a guy who's been researching it, Professor Goldsby, and I love how he talks about it because, as he says, this is the thing because it predominantly affects women. It's 1 in 3 women and 1 in 7 men,
mm,
and that's why there hasn't been the research, and also because it's so bound up with hormones as well. So
yeah,
yeah, I think it's like it's such a wake up. And what I love, like, so everything I've done with the videos, the Authentic Success Your Way, and also Rosh Hashanah, is all about trying to create this kind of spiritual retreat, this, or not necessarily spiritual retreat, but any a well-being retreat. And what I found is whenever I've gone on retreat or gone to something that acts like a retreat, like say convention, what you often get is when people come away from their day-to-day lives and they have the time and the space to just kind of be, it's amazing how many people break down in that space and realize that their life is not what they were thinking it was, and also
mm,
that they are not who they thought they were. And that thing of just letting go of the ego and saying, actually, all of this stuff that I thought was me is actually, a lot of it is coping strategies.
yeah, yeah.
not my personality. This is, a lot of the stuff I'm doing, I'm just copying the people around me because that's how I fit in and that's how I survive.
It's strange to find yourself in a position, sort of slightly touching back on the ADHD diagnosis, that realization that so many facets of what you thought or what I
Mm.
thought were me are actually ADHD. And then, as you say, then you've got coping strategies and you've got masking, and you're left in the position of, okay, so which bit is actually me?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's what a lot of the awareness is about. It's about, I think one of the most important things is just having a safe space.
Mm,
And I think that's such a healing thing. And a lot of the times when people come away, and when I used to teach Zumba, I still teach Zumba, but I was teaching so many classes and they were live classes, and people would come in and people would have so many powerful experiences in them because they had a safe space to come and just dance around, behave silly, have some fun, and to feel emotion.
mm,
So it was like, and it's funny actually. I know from a lot of conversations and talking to people in Zumba, there are an awful lot of people with autism who love Zumba because it's and it's funny because if you think about a sort of stereotypical concept of what it is to be autistic, it's like, oh no, the noise or this, and same thing with migraine, oh no, you wouldn't like that. But actually, it's on the one hand, you've got a very structured space, where it's like, this is the amount of time it is, these are the guidelines, these are the rules. So it's kind of, I've got a real safe space. And then I can kind of like be whoever I want within that space because I've got
mm,
this structure and I've got this safe environment. And a lot of people find that a really great place to be sociable when they don't feel comfortable in so we got a lot of people, especially people who've got Asperger's or autistic, who really cling on to Zumba because it is a wonderful, like, inclusive space. But also within the Zumba, and this is probably why I love it as well, is there's a lot of structure in terms of the dancing. So in terms of the
mm,
choreography, so there's a lot of patterns that you learn, and it's not surprising. I think when I look at it, I think, okay, I did maths, I did film, I did Zumba, and there's a lot of things that have a lot of patterns and um, a lot of real joy in looking at structure and things like that. So, I think when I started talking to people, and it was about probably about 6 months, I've been sort of saying to my friends and family, having these little conversations where I go, I think I might be autistic, and pretty much every single person has gone like, duh, like, yeah, and you're like, oh, I thought it was this really big deal, and I thought everyone was going to be like shocked, or they would, and everyone's like, do you yeah, yeah, kind of not surprised, and I find that I don't know. I guess I find that kind of, it's lovely to have said that, to have had those conversations, and I feel so much freer now. Like, we're talking about it now. Whereas I think when I first started thinking about it and doing the questionnaires, and it was a bit overwhelming and a bit intimidating to sort of think, well, I don't, how do I deal with this if I get a diagnosis, and what happens, and then I think ultimately I looked at it and you think, well, I'm still me, no matter what else happens, I've always been me underneath. So it just really kind of says, oh, okay, um, this ultimately, it should make our lives easier if we have a diagnosis or if we have a strong feeling. It should make our lives easier because it should help to make sense of certain things, and like why we feel challenged by certain things, and take the pressure off of having to try and be like other people.
yeah. I mean, I think I originally went for diagnosis because I thought in workplace environments it would give me a level of legal protection, which I have subsequently found is not the case.
Mm,
Although in theory it should do. And given the particular scenario that I have in mind, where it was an education environment that supposedly specialized in young people with educational differences, it didn't.
no,
But from a personal point of view, and my partner is ADHD as well, although he's not diagnosed, it enables us to look at a situation and say, I struggle with this issue because of ADHD. It's not a personal flaw. It means that we know, for example, that we do better if we do, say we need to cook. If we cook together, we will actually do it. We're far more likely to get on with it, doing it together, because we're body doubling. And
mm,
if we didn't know about ADHD, we wouldn't know about body doubling. And it's little bits and pieces like that that are enabling to understand what the issue that you're facing is and potential ways around it. You know,
mm,
you I don't think you can necessarily cure ADHD or autism or any of those things, nor do I think that that is something that I feel comfortable with the idea of. But to function in the society that we have, sometimes you do need to have your workarounds. And how can you know what works as a workaround unless you truly understand what you're dealing with? Um, so in that respect, the diagnosis has been very, very useful. And I mean, since I was diagnosed, my brother was diagnosed as ADHD, my niece has been diagnosed as autistic, and so on. So I mean, you start to look around at the family, and you start to look around at your friends, and you realize that actually you're not this one isolated unit with this weird set of characteristics. It's actually incredibly common. And how many of us out there in the world have been forced into a situation by what I suspect is nowhere near as typical as they
mm.
present. And we've all been forced into doing this masking and forced into these pretenses and try, to be all of the square pegs desperately trying to fit into round holes.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And um, I think even doing the questionnaires for me was very helpful. Particularly, we don't call it Asperger's anymore, apparently, but I doing one which was designed for Asperger's. And as I did the questionnaire, and I was like, a lot of the stuff that I experience, no, because obviously, I don't know if you're aware, like a lot of people, there's a sort of spike, and it's very much like migraine. Again, another genetic condition about the brain, a spike in puberty, and a spike at perimenopause and menopause because things are
Mm.
so affected by your hormones. Um, and so a lot of the stuff I'm looking at and I'm thinking, well, has this been just recently in the last few years? And is this perimenopausal? What's going on? But when I did the questionnaire that was the old Asperger's one, and I did that, and it was like it was literally like every question took me right back to my childhood and relationships, and it suddenly was like, oh wow, oh wow. And I think it's very much like, the crazy thing is all this, there's so much negativity, particularly in the States, but there is so much positivity about being different and having neurodivergence. But I think a lot of it is where we have challenges. It's a bit like I'm extremely short-sighted. And if I go to, and I've got astigmatism, so if I go to the optician and they look at me and they give me a diagnosis, I can get glasses and I can function. If you've got hearing problems, you can get hearing aids.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things that we can have, and then once you have that, you can do anything that you want. So a lot of it is understanding, oh, okay, this is where I've got differences. This is where I'm weaker at this, but I'm stronger at that.
Yeah.
And I was saying, I did a podcast with somebody who was a parenting podcast, and we were talking about neurodivergence and autism. And I was explaining, and as I said, if you didn't have people who were autistic, I mean, and as I say, I did my first degree in maths, I did my second degree in film, I worked in finance, and looking back, I'm like, wow, the proportion of people I've worked with or studied with who are most likely autistic is
Hmm.
here. And if we didn't have people who had this focus, this special interest, this kind of ability to just be, you know, obsessive about things, how many inventions would we have missed out on? How many mathematical theories will we, and I look at it and I think, if we, it's like anything, it's like exercise, fitness, sports. If we let people do what comes naturally to them, they can excel. I can excel if I'm doing something. I was terrible at sports. I was awful. I have terrible hands, but then I get into something I love, and it's like I love it. I'm passionate about it, and I'm really good at it. But also part of that goodness is because I'm like, wow, I found something that I can actually do and that I'm good at. And it's allowing the diversity. And it's like saying, do you know what? We don't all have to feel the same way. We don't have to have the same reactions to things. We don't have to like the same foods. We don't have to all like the same movies or anything. We don't have to have the same opinions. We can have differences in opinions. And actually, that gives us, as a society, that gives us um, more strength, not less strength, if we have a diversity, within.
Totally.
Exactly. Within a family, if we have a diversity, it's like, you like doing this, I like doing that. Great, you go do that. I'll do the washing up, you do the drying up because I like this and you like that. Instead of saying, like, we all have to fit into, and it's a factory way of doing things, isn't it? We all have to do things like this and we have to do it like that.
I think if we lived in a world where everybody was the same, we all had the same tastes, we all had the same opinion, there would never be any progress.
Mm,
What would be the need? We all like the same thing. We all have the same opinion. Everybody would be content. There would never be any. But what if?
yeah.
And my fear when, I mean, obviously, when you hear some of the stuff going on in America, but less so just the way ordinary people respond to things. And I mean, I've seen some appalling things said about ADHD by, parents of kids who are ADHD who just do not understand it at all. And in their mindset, it's very much about, yeah, they've got this diagnosis, but I'm getting this for them so they can be normal. I'm getting this for them so, oh well, now they've got friends and now they've got this, and you say to people, but ADHD is normal.
Yes,
You
it is.
know,
Yeah. I
it
mean, I think one of the things that I've been struggling with is accepting the migraine. And when I talk about it, it's like it's very difficult to accept because that's a real problem because it has comes with some pretty nasty symptoms.
hmm
But at the same time, all the work that I've done over the years is all about loving and accepting myself the way I am. And so there are days it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. But at the same time, it's like, this is the brain that I have.
I can't remember if I mentioned it to you or not, but I had a daith piercing done. Don't know if you can see it on camera.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about a friend of quite a few people have told me about this. And yeah, I have considered it, but I sort of ultimately decided it wasn't for me. But I think it's brilliant if it works for you.
Life changing.
Mm.
I got to a point where I was getting 3 migraines a week or
Mm.
more. And it was just this constant one after another. And it was almost like the never ending migraine. And I had that done. And now I get them about every 18 months, something like that, like one every 18 months, which I mean, I'd rather have none, but I can live with one every 18
Oh,
months. And when I
I
do get it,
yeah.
it's nothing like it was before. It's like it it's something you'd rather not have. It's not a bad headache because they are so different from a headache, but it's bearable.
I think that's
Where I would. I
That's
remember the worst ones that I ever had. I was taking inulin. Someone has said, "Oh, it's a marvelous thing, take inulin." Clearly did not agree with me. And I reached the point where I overdosed on codeine to try and stop the pain.
awesome.
And the thought of throwing myself out of the window just to stop the pain was, very real at that point in time.
Yes.
I'm kind of glad I didn't. And I'm glad that,
Yes.
the codeine worked and, that was all fine. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean about migraine. And I have to say that I can't guarantee a day piercing works for everyone, but for me, it was life changing.
I think but the thing is, I think it's always important to go with your intuition,
Yeah,
when it comes to, and this thing I find is that there's so many treatments and almost none of them work for everybody.
yeah.
So when you're looking at treatments, it's like, this consultant will say, why don't you try this? And this consultant say, why don't you try that? And actually, then they look at it and say, yeah, but this could be good for this, some people, and this could be. And I think the best way, when I went to this symposium and we had all these different consultants talking about it, it was very interesting. And this guy, they were talking about why he was into it and why he'd studied it. And he said, it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating. And I thought that's a really nice way of describing it. And like, why does this one treatment work for one person? And I actually think, I was doing a grant proposal, and I said, you know what? The migraine sufferers are like the canaries of the neurological world. And I was
Mm,
like, I think we should be doing studies with migraine sufferers to see what benefits, what benefits people, because it's also, it could be linked to other brain disorders, other neurological disorders, things like dementia, Parkinson's, even MS. But those ones you're only going to find out sort of when you get older, whereas with migraine sufferers, we're like canaries.
mm.
And if we do something that seems to, that helps with the pain, helps with the symptoms, shouldn't we be studying that so that we can kind of figure out, neurological health for everybody? But they turned me down, so we didn't do that. But I thought it was a very good pitch. I just feel
Well,
like,
I mean, I agree with you, but I suspect strongly that there is a reluctance around because there are too many people with a vested interest in selling us stuff rather than cure. Call me a cynic.
no, no, I think there's I mean, I've met some fantastic people working in this area, and really driven by the desire to stop people being in so much pain. And what I really liked, Professor Goseby, he did so much work, he's done so much work and he's still doing it. And at the symposium, as he said, he came up with these CGRP inhibitors, and nothing is patented, because he said he wanted everything to go out as soon as it was developed.
Mhm.
They're not making any money there's no patent on these drugs, because they didn't, in the same ways like most, but it's actually been funded mostly by like the public bodies. So whereas a lot of the pharmaceutical advances, as you say, they're people investing money into developing them, whereas this is, but we're still waiting. I would like to try those. I feel like they would be quite fun to try.
Mm, yeah.
Almost zero. They've got zero side effects as opposed to pretty much every other treatment that you can have. So you never know. Maybe they'll finally get me some of those, and I'll be all right.
Well,
Well,
give it a try. But it's now making me wonder, what effects, would those drugs then have on, ADHD or autism? I mean, the
well,
things are interrelated, if not the same.
I don't think they would do, and because CGRP is something that spikes during migraine attacks.
Okay.
It is, and I think it is quite specific to migraine. But and I mean, it's just, but it's what's good about it is they've recognized this is the chemical in your body that is actually related to what's going on. So it has been a big step forward, because before everyone was saying, oh, it's your blood vessels and this and that and the other thing, and it's actually not that at all. That is actually more of a symptom rather than a cause. We still don't know why these things happen, but we know that that's like the root of it, which is, a really big step forward, considering, everything that we didn't know about it for decades and decades and things. But I think bringing it all back to authentic success, as we say, we always spend more energy in holding ourselves back,
Mm,
spend more energy trying to not be ourselves than just being ourselves. So I think it's really interesting when we look at neurodivergence, or anything really where we're not being our authentic selves, that masking, that hiding, it's all, it uses so much energy. And actually, when we release it, it's so wonderfully freeing. But I think it's very hard when we're changing those habits and actually figuring out which habits do we want to let go of, and which habits come from being around certain people as we're growing up, and whereas, like, and sometimes when I have conversations with people, family members, there's these little alarm bells that go off, and it's like, oh wow, this is why I don't talk about this, because if I say this, then I get shut down.
mm,
So it's kind of like, and it's learning, it's like, okay, so this is where I feel embarrassed about something, because if I talk about it, I get shamed. Whereas, say, for
mhm.
example, I love the conversation that we're having, because we're both talking about different experiences, but also that feeling of like, if I do it this way, this is easier for me. And why wouldn't you? You're talking about body doubling. It's like, to find something that makes life easier for you, it's just so wonderful, isn't it? It's like, why wouldn't
Yeah, yeah.
why wouldn't you do that? And it's so great. But then again, we often get shamed about things. Oh, you need to be able to do this, and I think one of the biggest things I've found the last few years is having to ask for help and having to ask for support. And that, I think, it kind of comes across from everything. I think there's this idea of we have to be independent, and we have to be able to do this and do that and do that. It's like, well, actually, it's okay if we need um, if we need to have certain supports, and not just like people supporting us, but like, I often wear a face mask on public transport because of the smells, and I often have my headphones on, but to try and cover up other, because if somebody's got their phone and they're doing something, it drives me crazy. And it's like, it's very hard sometimes to, I think, with migraine, it's very clearly a pain, but sometimes that it feels painful, even though it's not a physical pain. It's
Yes,
like a mental pain.
yes.
Um, so there's often like what do we call those little things that we have, all the little things that we carry around with us or we take with us to make it a little bit easier,
Hmm.
or techniques that we can learn as
Yeah.
well.
It's funny you say that about the mask because of the smell. Because I
Mm,
hate buses, and it was only when you said that I realised that yeah, it's because of the smell.
yeah,
I hadn't
and
thought of that one. And yet I travelled on the tube for years.
yeah,
I come from London. I moved down to Sussex when I was 40, and from being fairly about 13 or whatever, it was common for us, as a group of us would get the tube, travel somewhere. Never really had a problem with that, but now I can't go near it.
yeah. I find it's so fascinating, and I think it doesn't matter whether it's just I was a normal person, like, when you let go of this facade of who you've been trying to be. And I did talk in the workshop, in the video, about an awakening I had, and I think it's that I say it's a feeling of being destroyed, where you almost don't know who you are anymore. But and it's really about saying, well, hang on, all these things I thought, I feel this way, I act this way, I am this person. Suddenly, it's like I don't know if any of that's true or real anymore. And about coming back to just saying, okay, let me find out who I am. But one of the things I find, I look back and I think, how could I was able to do this, I was able to do this, I was able to do this. And now I find I can't do it anymore. And I don't know whether it's just that there was so much energy required in masking certain things, and suddenly that energy is just gone. And it's like, oh, I spent all this time, fitting in and trying to be a certain person. It's like and suddenly when you get freed, you can't, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it.
I'd hazard a guess at one of two things. First one being a possibility that we're all given a finite amount of energy to do those things and you run out. And the other one being menopause.
Mm. I
And
think,
that,
yeah, the same. I think the thing is when you get to this, when you go through it, it's a bit like going through puberty. There's a thing of like suddenly there's more of a challenge of going through this phase of your life. So there isn't any excess energy
Mhm.
to do the bullshit. Excuse my friends. There,
I think that there is something said, and you may well know better than I, that when your estrogen levels drop, you actually become far less amenable. That there is something about women who are of the fertile age, that there is something in the hormones that makes them easier going, more inclined to be adaptable, to adapt to other people, more flexible. And then women go through menopause and it's like, screw that.
yeah, I mean, I think there's definite phases in my life before this where I've just said no. And one I keep thinking about this recently is, so sometimes I find it very hard to talk, which I think people find surprising because I do talk a lot. But sometimes with migraine or just I don't know where the overlap is between these conditions. Um, but sometimes it's very difficult to communicate, and I don't want to. I don't want to be social, and I don't. And I love the fact that now I feel given myself that permission to not always be smiley and pleasant, and and being everybody's best friend. And actually I wrote about this in the book Free Feeling Real Emotions Every Day, and it was like when I had this awakening, it was like I didn't want to be saying so much all the time, and I thought, you know what, let me just give myself permission to be yes, no, maybe, instead of and it felt so alien. It felt so alien, but it was also like recognizing that actually this is my desire. My desire is to be simple. And a lot of it is just recognizing that, you know what, if I was a man, I would have been allowed to be like this when I was younger. But if you're like that as a girl, it's like, oh, you're so rude. As a woman, you get judged for being rude if you're not really polite, and you have those little exchanges
Bubbly.
with people. Even when people, I think the other morning I was walking out with a migraine, and I came back, and some guy in this, and we talk, we say hello, we say good morning around here, every strangers, everybody say that. But a guy was like, he came up and he was like, "You all right? How you doing?" And I was like, I just looked at him and I was like, okay. And I walked, and I felt really like, oh, I'm a bit rude. But at the same time, I was like, why? Why should I feel the necessity to explain to somebody, or to beyond? I do like wearing a cap because I do like doing this. You do the little nod to
Mhm.
people when they go past. And I feel like that, if you're an old farmer with the flat cap kind of going, "Root, root," and I like that.
Touching your forelock, yeah.
But it brings me back to when I did the Camino de Santiago, and it's very common though. I love a lot of people do the walk, they do the pilgrimage in silence. And you can buy badges, and you can, again, at a lot of retreats, you can buy badges or get badges that just say, I am in silence. So doing that, it was like, I mean, a lot of time there was nobody around, so I was being, but also there's a recognition that if you're not talking and if you're not being particularly verbal on that Camino, people, there's this thing of like a lot of people do it in silence.
Mhm.
So if you're a bit like that, nobody's going to assume that you're just rude. They're going to assume, oh, you're in silence. And I think that's this whole thing of going on a silent retreat, or just getting that badge for an hour or a day. It gives us permission to not talk.
Yeah.
And it's actually incredible, it's an incredible permission, and it makes you realize how, when I did that, it made me realize like, oh wow, I didn't realize how often my talking was because of a pressure, because I'd even sold myself. I'd sold it to myself. Oh, I'm so chatty. I'm always so friendly. I'm the nicest person. I've got to always be friendly. And also just because you want people to not just like you, but to feel, to make other people feel good. So it's like, oh, I've got to be well, I've got to be like the best hostess at the best cocktail party in the world, and I've got to do this, and I've got to, and I suddenly it's like, okay, I don't have to do that. And I don't have to be like that. And, what is it that I want? When do I want to talk? When do I want to be chatty? Or when do I want to just, you know, just say, my favorite is always things like, lovely to meet you, lovely to see you. And then that's the way. But a lot of people find it, people find it very difficult if you're not willing to have a chat when they want to have a chat.
I think that's an interesting one. Are you familiar with rejection sensitive dysphoria?
No, but I have heard of it, and I am feeling that it's something I should read up on some more.
I think it would be a good one. So, for argument's sake, if I met you and you were in that I really don't want to talk state, if you said to me, I'm having one of my don't want to talk moments, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. No problem at all. Off you go. If I didn't know that about you and you did the okay and then walked away, that would really trigger rejection sensitive dysphoria for me because I would be like, well, she's always so friendly and chatty, and now she won't talk to me. What have I done? Is she pissed off with me? And then I'd be like wanting to pursue you to be like, what have I done? What have I said? Have I upset you? And then my mind would go into a massive hyper focus overdrive, wondering what I had done to upset you, where in fact it would be nothing whatsoever to do with me.
Oh,
And I think there's an important communication aspect there. So if you had your I'm doing my silence thing on your badge and you pointed to it and I knew that was a thing, no problem at all. But it's an interesting one that, the two aspects of the neurodivergence there could, when you know about it, it's fine. But when you don't know about it, there's a real point there where you could really like spark off a problem where actually there really isn't one. Isn't that interesting?
but yeah, but I think that's definitely true. But I think a lot of it is also like a social expectation.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite teachers is Don Miguel Ruiz, and it's the Four Agreements. And I think what has been very freeing for me is the understanding of agreements. You know, what's an expectation, like a societal expectation, and what's an agreement. So when I make an agreement, it's like, right, I am sort of making a contract of what I'm going to do. So for example, if I'm out walking, I have no agreement that I'm going to exchange niceties with somebody, or I don't owe it to anybody.
No, no.
So, and I
But
know, and I know that a lot of people will take it personally,
oh yeah.
and could well take it personally because they think I'm judging them. But at the same time, it's like, okay, but I don't owe it to anybody.
No. I think probably as a part of being part of society, you sort of feel that, oh, I've met this person and I've talked to them, and we have an agreement that
Mm.
we chat, that we say hi, we chat. And I think then if that changes, if you don't understand why it might change,
Mm.
then I think your assumption is that you have done something to break the agreement.
Mm.
And that isn't actually necessarily the case, as we've obviously discussed. But the way that society presents things to us is that you think you have that relationship, and then if something goes wrong, it is always you which is at fault, which again probably is a bit of an ADHD thing. That
It,
it's that. I'm at fault because I have been told all my life I'm at fault. So you're doing your silence thing, something has changed, I must be at fault.
But I think it's also, it's funny, something that has come up for me again recently. So for example, on LinkedIn and things like that, and people talk about, putting your out of office on or doing this or doing, this kind of thing. And um, sometimes with the migraines, I can't check my emails for 3 days or
Mm,
longer, or something else might happen with my family or whatever. And so I do think about this a lot, and I also think, hang on a second, people saying, oh, I have to put an out of office on because people need to know if I don't get back to them, or what time they can expect to return, email, things like that. And I think, but I haven't agreed to. I'm not working for anybody who could have a reasonable expectation
mm,
of me replying to them. So, for example, I got my Zumba Gold class on a Monday, and I'll say, right, we're running this class. If I was going to have to cancel that, I'd let people know. I'd find a way to let people know. Um, but if I haven't got that agreement, if I haven't got that sort of, I haven't got an appointment with somebody, or we haven't discussed doing some work together, I don't feel. I've realised I don't have any. People might have an expectation that I'm going to reply to them, but I don't have any obligation to get back to them. And I find it interesting when I look on LinkedIn where people are tying themselves in knots about, oh, but I'm going on holiday, and I think, but you haven't promised anything.
yeah.
So, that's not, and I think that's the thing that we can do with everything, isn't it? We can say, oh, I should do this, or I could do that. But it's like, hang on, my agreements are my agreements. I have to buy into that. And I think one of the things that happened to me about the same time when I had this awakening was realizing that when people ring up and I've got a cold call, I can just hang up.
Mm,
I can, if somebody's a spam call, I say hello, and they're trying to sell me something, I can just hang up. I don't have to be nice. I don't have
no.
to give them an excuse. I don't have to be negative. I don't have to do anything horrible. I don't have to say anything bad. I can
Mhm.
just hang up and
Yeah.
block
No, no is a complete sentence.
quickly. And it's a wonderful feeling. You think, oh, actually, maybe how I feel in this situation is the most important thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Not having to please everybody. Oh, what a relief. What a
yeah.
relief.
I think
And
you really hit on something with expectations, because I think it's in Buddhism. I may be wrong about that. I think it's in Buddhism where they say that the greatest cause of anger is unmet expectations.
mm, I like that. And I
Mm,
do quite a lot of work on that and other things. And I think the thing is, we say, if you um raising your standards and lowering your expectations.
yes.
So it's kind of two things, and it's like, so if you raise your standards, for example, you might say, right, um, like you won't eat in a restaurant that isn't clean and smells good or anything, but you might walk in and then just go out again. So
Yeah.
you've raised your standards, but your expectations can be lowered because you're gonna maybe go and check out a couple of restaurants before you decide where to eat. Instead
Yeah.
of expecting the one, you see one and go, "Oh, I want to go there," and you walk in and then you're disappointed because it's not what you expected. But that's okay because you say, you know what, I'm not going to eat there. I'm going to go away and find somewhere I like. But it's both of those things. And one of the four agreements is, don't make, you know don't make assumptions. And the other one is, another one of the others is, don't take things personally. And honestly, that we laugh about that because it is so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. I mean, even like the weather, if we have bad weather on our birthday, oh no, it's my birthday and the weather's bad. You're like, wow, that's really taking it personally, isn't it?
The weather hates me.
Always happens to me. It always happens to me.
Mm,
But it's, also when we look at taking things personally, we realize how often we do it. And somebody, it is something that's very ingrained in us.
mm.
And actually we say, do you know what, if somebody doesn't like me, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
um, and not to take it personally, because most of the time it does have nothing to do with us. Even if somebody actively doesn't like us, it could be because we remind them of somebody that was horrible to them in the past.
Mm.
So it actually has, even though it feels very personal, it's got nothing to do with us as an individual. And I think that's really important, that a lot of time it's people's previous relationships and experiences. And it's not up to us to fix that. We don't have to fix that. We can be there and just be who we are, and we don't have to fix everything. We don't have to make everybody like us.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's so ingrained in us in kids that, you have to be likable.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of the times we put other people's comfort and desires above our own. And it's one of those things that we have to really reconsider. And I said, we're ending now, but going back to the whole thing about depression and anxiety and how we say how common and how prevalent it is at the moment, how often is that depression coming from not really not really actively loving ourselves and giving ourselves permission to be ourselves, and whether that
Mm.
makes other
Yeah.
people uncomfortable. And because guaranteed, if you when you are being authentic, you're gonna make somebody uncomfortable. Guaranteed.
Oh, totally. There's
Guaranteed.
always someone, but we don't actually owe anybody else, that we don't owe them being likable. We don't owe them masking. We don't owe them a pretense of being anybody other than who we are. The difficulty is working out who we are.
Yes, yes, but I think giving ourselves that safe space to work it out, it allows us to actually unravel that and to figure it out. Because until we give ourselves that permission, that safe space, it's not safe to be ourselves. So it's natural, we can't really start that journey. So anyway, it's so lovely. It's been such a lovely chat. I feel like
It
I'm
has,
definitely
hasn't
going
it?
to go and learn more. As I say, Alice, who's going to be on Saturday, she runs an organization all about neurodivergence. So we're going to have to be careful on Saturday that we get through the material. We don't just go talking, because we honestly, she could do a season on. She's such a wealth of information. So that's going to be great. And you've got the link and everything for Saturday, haven't you?
I have. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. Really looking forward to it. And
Yeah.
hope you
Me too.
have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you, my